NASA has announced bacterial life in Mars.
But what if they have turned a blind eye to evidence of advanced intelligent life?
But before NASA admitted microbes might have lived on the red planet, we already had some evidence suggesting something far more advanced that had lived on Mars. Evidence of civilization itself. So let's go over the facts and you decide what you make out of them. The first one that we're going to review is the face of Cydonia. And yes, I know, you might think that it's debunked, but stay with me for a while, and I bet you're gonna be surprised. In 1976, Viking 1 orbiter snapped frame 35A72 over the Cydonia region, and what came back wasn't just another Martian mesa, it was a formation over a mile long that looked like a human face. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth, even the illusion of teeth and hair when enhanced. The NASA official line was immediate and dismissive, just a trick of light and shadow. But here's the part that they don't emphasize. NASA never planned to look again. So the Viking orbiter circled Mars for years, yet the face was never reimaged during that entire mission. And it wasn't until decades later, under the relentless public pressure, that new missions were even equipped to look back at Cydonia. In fact, the Mars Observer launched in 1972 had no dedicated high-resolution cameras planned for Cydonia. That changed only after waves of books, articles, and even congressional inquiries that began to force NASA to look at it again. When the Mars Global Surveyor finally did revisit in 1998, NASA's press release celebrated the debunking. The face was nothing more than an eroded heel. But here's where things get murky. Independent researcher Dr. Marco Carlotto, an imaging scientist who worked in the aerospace industry for NASA as a reviewer, ran a full symmetry analysis on the Viking images. He found something at odds with the debunking offered by NASA. The face on Mars had bilateral symmetry, and the probability of a random geological accident achieving that was almost non-existent. In plain terms, nature rarely produces a mile-wide rock that looks like a carved face with aligned features in both sides. Needless to say, he was the last independent researcher that would have access to the raw data. The untold truth is that the Mars Global Surveyor images were released in versions that had been retouched, edited, smoothed, contrast adjusted, and in some versions literally magnified with interpolation that blurred sharp details. NASA claimed that this was standard practice to make images easier to interpret. Critics countered that this process removed almost all relief features of the landscape. Even worse, the new images were rendered mixing different solar angles into one shot, basically eliminating all shadows and reliefs of the final images. Dr. Stanley McDaniel, the author of the McDaniel Report on NASA's handling of Cydonia, accused the agency of scientific negligence or outright obfuscation. He pointed out that if NASA truly wanted to resolve the controversy, they should release the raw data to the public. They never did. NASA returned to the face of Cydonia with the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2007 and again in 2010, always with the same framing, it's just a hill, always offering rendering images but not the raw data. To the mainstream public, it was debunked. To those who examined the details, it remained a mystery. The face wasn't alone. Just south of it, Viking photographs revealed a collection of geometric structures that researchers quickly dubbed the city. Among them, one in particular stood out, a 5-sided formation that came to be known as the DM Pyramid, named after its discoverers, Vincent Di Pietro and Gregory Molinar, 2 NASA engineers who stumbled on the Viking frames while combing through raw data. At first glance, the DM Pyramid looked like a loop-sided hill. But zoom in, and something else emerged. 5 sides with internal symmetry, sharp angles, and edges that appeared to intersect at a near-perfect 30, 60, and 90-degree increments. Not random, but geometric. Independent imaging expert Dr. Mark Carlotto ran fractal and shape analysis on the DM Pyramid. His conclusion? The geometry wasn't consistent with natural erosion. The ratios between sides suggested intentional design with mathematical constants found in the architecture. Even more compelling, researcher Errol Turun, a cartographer within the U.S. Defense Mapping Agency, studied the DM Pyramid in the mid-80s. He published a paper noting that the angles encoded pi relationships, the golden ratio, and even aligned with astronomical markers to Torun. This wasn't just a hill, it was an artificial structure. When mapped, the face, the Dian Pyramid, and several nearby smaller pyramids form what looked like a geometric complex. Lines drawn between the structures intersected in deliberate angles, mirroring patterns familiar in sacred geometry on Earth. This became the centerpiece of Richard Hoagland's work. In his book, The Monuments of Mars, Hoagland argued that the entire Cydonia region resembled an abandoned city, complete with a fortress, pyramids, and the face as a monumental centerpiece. He claimed the alignment encoded mathematical constants like pi and e, suggesting a sophisticated intelligence behind them. Long before Viking photographed the face of Mars, scientists were puzzled by Mars' two moons, Phobos and Deimos, tiny irregular potato-shaped bodies with orbits and physical properties that have kept the mystery alive for over a century. In 1959, Soviet astrophysicist Losef Shklovsky analyzed the orbital decay of Phobos and came to a startling conclusion. The moon's behavior could not be explained by its density if it were a solid rock. He suggested it might be hollow, perhaps an artificial satellite. While Western scientists quickly distanced themselves from the claim, Shklovsky doubled down, publishing his work with Carl Sagan in the book Intelligent Life in the Universe in 1966. Though Sagan softened the idea, he admitted that if Phobos were hollow, it would radically alter how we understand Mars history. In the late 1980s, the Soviet Union launched Phobos 1 and Phobos 2. They were probes to study the Martian moons up close. Phobos 1 was lost to a software error. Phobos 2 successfully reached Mars, entered orbit, and began sending back data. Then, in March 1989, as it prepared to release a lander on Phobos' surface, it went silent dead, but not before sending a handful of final images, and showed a massive elliptical shadow, described by some engineers as a cigar-shaped object, stretching tens of kilometers across the Martian atmosphere. Officially, the probe simply malfunctioned. Unofficially, whispers circulated. Something had interfered. The fact that the probe failed just before delivering a lander onto the mysterious moon only fueled speculation. And then there was the monolith. When NASA Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter swept past Phobos, a high-resolution camera caught something that shouldn't have been there, a massive gleaming object standing upright on the irregular surface. Not a crater, not rubble, but a single towering block. Analysis of its shadow put its size at about 85 meters tall, nearly 280 feet. That's the height of a 30-story skyscraper, sitting alone on a moon barely 22 kilometers across. A single tower the size of an office building, stabbing the sky. NASA officially labeled it a rock, but rocks do not usually look like skyscrapers. The rocks do not stand isolated, sharp-edged, perfectly upright, while the rest of the terrain is jagged chaos. On Earth, we can find similar structures formed by atmospheric processes, like wind, rain, and erosion. Phobos is an airless moon. There are only two events that can cause movement, a collision or an explosion, and the probabilities of either creating the monolith are astronomically low. Even Buzz Aldrin couldn't ignore it. On national television in 2009, the Apollo astronaut leaned forward and told viewers, "We should visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure, and this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once every 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, 'Who put that there? Who put that there?'" Aldrin's words captured what many felt, because no matter how you spin it, a 30-story tall monolith standing alone on a dead moon isn't something you just wave away as a boulder. It's a question mark carved in stone orbiting Mars. And there are signs that something awful happened on the surface of Mars. When you look at Mars today, it is a dead world. Thin atmosphere, barren deserts, no liquid water on the surface. But dig into its chemistry and a darker story emerges. one that suggests Mars didn't just fade into silence, it may have been violently destroyed. In the 1970s, the Viking landers analyzed the Martian atmosphere. What they found shocked planetary scientists. Unusually high levels of xenon-129, a rare isotope. On Earth, xenon-129 is known as a signature of nuclear fission. The normal explanation is that xenon-129 comes from natural radioactive decay of the iodine-129 in the planet's crust. But the concentrations on Mars were just not high, sky high, far beyond what natural processes could easily explain. Physicist Dr. John Brandenburg, who once worked on plasma propulsion research for NASA, took a bold stance. In his papers and lectures, he argued that Mars shows the unmistakable traces of a massive nuclear detonation, or even multiple detonations, in the distant past, or a nuclear holocaust. Brandenburg pointed to two regions in particular: Cydonia, yes, the same area with the face in the pyramids, and Galaxia's chaos. Both, he claimed, show surface patterns consistent with the aftermath of enormous explosions. He even argued that the red dust covering the planet is a layer of fallout, oxidized soil laced with radioactive isotopes like thorium and uranium. His conclusion was chilling. Mars was once Earth-like, with rivers, oceans, and perhaps even life. Then something or someone unleashed weapons powerful enough to strip its atmosphere and sterilize its surface. Mainstream scientists rejected Brandenburg's conclusions. They argued that natural process, volcanic outgassing, planetary differentiation, can explain the isotopic ratios. But here's the problem: those explanations remain theoretical, while the nuclear war model fits the data too neatly for some to ignore. Brandenburg himself has put it bluntly: two great disasters happened on Mars, and they look nuclear. They left signatures just like hydrogen bombs test on Earth. If this was natural, it was the strangest natural nuclear reactor in the universe. If Mars really suffered a nuclear catastrophe, the implications are staggering. Either it was home to an advanced civilization that annihilated itself, or it was attacked. In both cases, what we see today isn't just a dead planet. It is a graveyard for something once alive, once thriving, wiped away in an instant. And here's the kicker: some of the evidence comes from the very same regions, Cydonia, pyramids, and the face. NASA has worked hardest to dismiss. Coincidence? Or these dots are meant to be connected? If Cydonia and Phobos are the stuff of legends, a microbial story is what finally forced NASA to admit the unthinkable. Mars has the fingerprints of life. In 1984, a team of scientists trekking through the Allan Hills of Antarctica found a dark football-sized rock, Allan Hills 84001. At first, it was cataloged like any other meteorite, but later testing revealed it had come from Mars, blasted off the surface millions of years ago by an impact, drifting through space before crashing landing on Earth. Inside, under an electron microscope, scientists saw something impossible to ignore: tiny worm-like structures that look eerily like fossilized bacteria. Alongside them were complex organic molecules and magnetite crystals of a type known on Earth to be produced by microbes. In 1996, President Bill Clinton stood at the White House podium and told the world, "Today, Rock 84001 speaks of the possibility of life. If this discovery is confirmed, it will be surely one of the most stunning insights into our universe that science has ever uncovered." It was a bombshell. Not in the abstract, but in a rock you could hold in your hand. The backlash was immediate. Skeptics argued the fossils could be produced by non-biological chemistry. The debate raged in journals for years, with no consensus, but the fact remained: the structures looked alive. Even today, many in the field quietly admit the meteorite still carries the best evidence of extraterrestrial biological life ever found. But if there is one piece of evidence that makes scientists nervous, it's gases. Because gases don't lie. On Mars, the air is thin, just 1% of Earth's atmosphere. And in that fragile envelope, every molecule counts. If you find a gas that shouldn't be there, the immediate question is what's producing it? Back in 2003, Earth-based telescopes detected hints of methane in the Martian atmosphere. It wasn't much, but enough to raise eyebrows. Methane is an unsustainable gas on Mars. The sun's ultraviolet light should break it down within a few centuries at most. That means any methane detected today must be new, recently produced. And NASA was skeptical until its own rover confirmed it. In 2013, the Curiosity rover measured background methane levels hovering around 4 parts per billion. Low but persistent. Then in 2019, Curiosity caught something astonishing. 20x spike up to 21 parts per billion over just a few days, and then it was gone. This isn't how geology behaves. Geological methane, released from underground rocks, usually sleeps slowly and consistently, but these Martian spikes appeared suddenly, as if something underground was burping, releasing gas impulses, then going quiet again. On Earth, 95% of methane comes from biology, microbes called methanogens, which thrive underground and release methane as waste. Cows do it too, which is why scientists jokingly say methane is the smell of life. So when Curiosity reported those spikes, the biological explanation fit better than any other. NASA's official line? We don't know. They suggested chemical reactions between water and rock could produce methane, but those processes cannot explain the timing, the sudden burst, the seasonal patterns, the way methane builds in summer and vanishes in winter. To some, it looks like Mars is still alive. And as if methane weren't enough, Curiosity also found another anomaly. Oxygen levels in Gale Crater rise and fall with seasons. In spring and summer, oxygen increases by 30%. In fall and winter, it drops back down. This baffles scientists. Oxygen shouldn't be stable. Nothing in Mars' atmospheres explains these fluctuations. There is no known chemical process that can seasonally add and subtract oxygen at those rates. On Earth, what does that? Plants, microbes, life. The seasonal breathing of Mars, oxygen rising, oxygen falling, looks disturbingly like the signature of a biological at work. If Mars is breathing methane and oxygen pulsing with the seasons, then somewhere under its surface, something is alive. It might not be complex. It might be nothing more than the microbial colonies buried in the permafrost, but it would be live on Mars. And here's the catch. NASA has confirmed the measurements but refuses to commit to the implications. Instead, they publish paper after paper saying that the data is inexplicable, that unknown chemistry must be at work. Unknown chemistry, that's the official line. But to critics, that sounds like code for something NASA won't say out loud. Biology. Even the Viking landers back in the 1970s ran life detection experiments. One, the label release experiment, reported a positive result, metabolism in the soil. NASA dismissed it at the time, chalking it up to reactive chemicals, yet the lead scientist, Gilbert Levin, never changed his position. Viking had detected life and NASA simply refused to believe it. So from Viking to meteorites to methane plumes to oxygen, the story keeps circling back. Mars has life, maybe microbial, maybe fossilized, maybe even still clinging to the existence beneath the dust. But here's the irony. While NASA cautiously admits microbes are plausible, they do so only after decades of denying, delaying, and smothering earlier hints. Which raises the question, was this simply scientific caution, or was it another case of managing the narrative, keeping the mystery on a leash, never letting it run free? In May 2022, NASA Curiosity captured an image of a rock on the Mount Sharp in Gale Crater. At first glance, it looked like a doorway cut into the side of a cliff, rectangular, upright, almost architectural. The photo went viral. NASA quickly moved to explain a fracture caused by natural erosion, splitting the rock, nothing more. But the door wasn't inches wide as skeptics claim. Estimated based on the rover scale showed it was about a meter tall, large enough for a human or Martian. The placement, the shadows, the sharp lines, they looked deliberate. Whether erosion or artifact, The image became once more a reminder that sometimes Mars looks less like geology and more like ruins of something forgotten. Then there are the lights. Over the years, both Curiosity and Perseverance have photographed what appears to be bright flashes of glowing orbs on the Martian horizon. In 2014, Curiosity snapped a famous shot, a ghostly beam of light rising from the surface in the distance. NASA's explanation was dust reflecting sunlight off rocks, or cosmic rays striking the camera sensor. But the light appeared in multiple frames, always in the same region, always upright. Later, similar anomalies appear in Perseverance images. To some, they were nothing but glitches. To others, they look like artificial lights, evidence of underground activity and something moving across the barren surface. So here we are. In the last decade alone, Mars has shown us a doorway carved in stone, lights that flicker across its horizon, and gases that act as though something down there is alive and breathing. Each time NASA offers explanations, erosion, cosmic rays, geology, each time the answer raises more questions than they resolve. If this were Earth, we'd call it biology, we'd call it life, but because it's Mars, it gets filed away as anomaly. And yet, taken together, the phase, the pyramid, Phobos, the nuclear scars, the microbes, and now the doorways, the lights, and gases, one theme emerges: Mars refuses to stay dead.